All right, hello everyone. We're gonna go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us for today's presentation. It's a new format online. It's new for all of us, so hopefully this goes well. Today we are excited to present Dave Wu, who is an ICFRC board member and a University of Iowa adjunct lecturer, and he is going to be speaking to us today on observations from afar, recent elections in Taiwan, and implications. I am Megan Phillips, one of your ICFRC interim co-directors and hosts for today's program. As always, we thank our members, volunteers, and interns for making these forums possible. We also want to acknowledge our university and community supporters, the University of Iowa's international programs, University of Iowa's honors program, the Public Policy Center, and the Stanley UI Foundation Support Organization. We also thank today's special sponsors, David, Denise, and Mike Tiffany, Dick and Joyce Somerville, and Hutha Sayer. I also thank City Channel 4 for helping us continue to make our programs available to online audiences. Our format today is definitely not our usual one, but I think you'll find it comfortingly similar to our usual programs. Following our speaker's presentation at about 1 o'clock, hopefully, we will have a 15-minute Q&A. Please submit your questions via the chat function on your Zoom screen, which you can access by clicking on the chat box icon at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Our speaker will answer questions submitted by chat. Please be patient with this process. This will be our first time attempting a program in this way, so we'll see how that works. As a final reminder, I ask that you please keep your audio and video turned off for the duration of the presentation and do not interrupt the speaker. If you experience technical difficulties, please refer to support.zoom.us for user guides and other support. And with that, I am excited to introduce Dave Wu, ICFRC board member. Dave was born in Taiwan and grew up in Canada. His professional training was focused on engineering and business management with a Ph.D. in mechanical engineering from the University of Toronto and Master of Business Administration from the Arizona State University. He spent over 30 years in the aerospace industry and traveled extensively for business, especially in Asia, which included a 3-year assignment in Singapore. He is an ardent follower of global affairs, and he was fortunate to have experienced the first Quebec Separation Referendum in 1980, as well as a general election in Singapore, in addition to numerous Canadian and American elections. In this talk, Dave will examine the recent elections in Taiwan, the 2018 local election and the 2020 presidential election, and the implications of the election results in regional and global affairs. Please welcome me and please join me in welcoming Dave Wu.
Thank you, Megan.
Yes, let me stop screen sharing so you can put your slides up.
Okay.
All right, are you able to share?
Okay, it says host is disabled, participant screen sharing.
Okay, let me do that. Only host. Okay.
Okay. Okay, so thank you very much for the introduction. As Megan said, I'm Dave Wu. I'm very pleased to be able to make this presentation today. To all of you, I hope you're all doing well and keeping safe. I do have to make one correction. In one of the announcements, program announcements, you may have seen me listed as Professor of Central Asia and Pacific Studies, Professor of Central Asia and Pacific Studies. That is obviously an error. I was given a promotion by one of the interns. So I want to correct that. This presentation is not based on any scholarly research, but it's based on my many years of travel in the region, as well as my interest continuing interest in the happenings in Taiwan. So as you can see, I hope you can see everything on the screen. hopefully you can see that where Taiwan's located. It's located off the southeast coast of China, and it's not too far from the Philippines. And I'll mention in a few minutes that some of the indigenous people of Taiwan are actually related to the people in Philippines, Malaysia, and Polynesia. So what I tend to cover today is the background of Taiwan's situation. Taiwan has a somewhat unique situation in terms of its relationship to its big neighbor to the west, China, and some of the other peculiarities, including its political makeup, the dominant parties, and so on and so forth. And then now getting to the 2018 municipal elections and then 2020 presidential elections, the presidential election. The municipal elections in most countries are not that significant, but in Taiwan it's somewhat different because it serves as a function similar to our midterm elections here. That's where voters can register their satisfaction or dissatisfaction with the ruling party, and so that is why I want to cover the municipal election. Also in this past election cycle, there was a very significant phenomenon which took place, and that basically was the major focus of media coverage in Taiwan. And I'll get to that. And then, of course, the implications. Whenever we talk about Taiwan, we always have to bear in mind the big elephant in the room, and that is China. So for many of you, that you're probably aware that Taiwan's official name is the Republic of China. And but in order to avoid confusion between the People's Republic of China, which is mainland China, that people have resorted to referring to Taiwan basically just by its geographical name. The Republic of China was founded in 1912, and then after losing the Civil War to the communists, the ROC government withdrew to Taiwan in 1949. Taiwan's population is around 24 million people. Greater than 95% of Taiwan's people are Han Chinese or descendants of the Han Chinese. Approximately 3% are indigenous, and these are, as I mentioned earlier, these are the people who share similarities to the Filipinos, the Malays of Southeast Asia, and the Polynesians. So, as the name implies, the Republic of China has to include some other territories in addition to the island of Taiwan itself. And so in addition to Taiwan proper, the ROC still controls some territories. And these are islands very close to the coast of mainland China. Administratively, these islands actually should belong to the province of Fujian, which is just across the strait. But it's a remnant of the Civil War between the nationalists and the communists that Taiwan has been able to retain control of these islands. Some of you may remember that in 1958, there was a fierce artillery battle over these islands between China and the ROC. And the United States came to Taiwan's aid, and Taiwan, or ROC, was able to maintain control of those islands. In terms of relations with mainland China, it's being normalized quite a bit in recent years. it really wasn't so long ago that the two sides were in a state of war. Officially, they're still at a state of war because there was never a formal peace treaty, or there wasn't even a formal ceasefire between the two sides. So, so the Taiwan situation sometimes has been described as a potential flashpoint, because in 1960, in the presidential debate between Presidents Nixon and Kennedy, candidates Nixon and Kennedy, that the defense of those offshore islands was actually a central point of debate in their presidential debates. Taiwan is also unique in that it's a self-ruled country in all respects, in all respects that people would consider to be a country, because it has its has its own government, has its own armed forces. It's a democracy, which is not necessarily a requirement for being classified as a country, but it doesn't have representation in the United Nations. The ROC withdrew in 1971 as the mainland China, or the People's Republic China, was recognized as the sole and legitimate representative of China. So that point is the withdrawal of the ROC, in retrospect, can be regarded perhaps potentially as a strategic mistake, because I think back then, if Chiang Kai-shek, who was still alive at the time, was willing to accept a lesser position, shall we say, then Taiwan could have maintained representation in the United States, but that's history. So we have to move on from that point. The United States broke formal relations with the ROC back in 1979, and diplomatic recognition switched to the People's Republic at that time. However, there are still very, very strong informal relations between the two sides, and the U.S. interests are represented by the American Institute in Taiwan, or short name is AIT. In terms of the political landscape, there are two dominant parties, but there's also a very large and growing non-aligned electorate. On one hand, in terms of the political parties, one is the Kuomintang, or short for that is the KMT. It founded the Republic of China in 1912. It's the leader of what's so-called the Pan-Blue Camp, and the Pan-Blue Camp represents that that portion of the population that still want to retain some ties to China. They're due to either they were first-generation immigrants to Taiwan, or that they're the offsprings of those immigrants, or that they just identify with both Taiwan and mainland China. Traditionally, the KMT was staunchly anti-communist, but rapprochement with the People's Republic really had taken place since the end of the Cold War. So in the 1980s, late 80s, that this rapprochement started to take place after several rounds of negotiations. There was a term was coined, and that was the 1992 consensus. Basically, this consensus boils down to that both sides agree to set aside political differences and focus on exchange that is more cultural, more educational, and more business interactions between two sides. And so the essence of this consensus is that there's both sides agree there's one China, but there are different interpretations. That the people on the mainland, you can keep on referring yourself to the People's Republic, and here on Taiwan side, we can refer to the Republic of China. So that has proven to be a very pragmatic solution to the political differences. And again, this consensus was not documented in any formal document. So with Taiwan mainland, there are a lot of things that are not documented. That, as I mentioned before, there's no formal peace treaty. So there's still officially in a state of war. But there's plenty of interactions between the two sides. At the end of 2019, according to the Taiwan government figures, there are 400,000 Taiwanese working in China. And then if you add their dependents, the number of Taiwan citizens that are living in China could be as high as 1 million plus. So there are a lot of interactions between the two sides. China now is Taiwan's largest trading partner, but there's still this underlying tension between the two of them. Now, KMT is usually considered to be more socially conservative. This is in terms primarily today in terms of LGBTQ movement. They're more conservative than the Democratic Progressive Party, which I'll get to in a minute. But in a lot of other things, there's not that much difference between the KMT and the Democratic Progressive Party. Another major difference is in nuclear power. Actually, the DPP is opposed to nuclear power, whereas the KMT is pro-nuclear power. But that is a big issue in Taiwan because it's an island. And having a reliable source of power is obviously very important. Now, getting to the other dominant party in the Democratic Progressive Party, it was founded in 1986. It's the leader of what's called the Pan-Green Camp. And this camp has aspirations for Taiwan independence. And what exactly that means, again, is a little bit murky, like a lot of things when we're talking about Taiwan. The DPP was originally a large tent party that opposed the authoritarian rule of the KMT. So it included elements that were sympathetic to the mainland. They included elements that felt that KMT's narrative at the time that we're going to retake mainland by force, that was unrealistic. And then there were, of course, factions that wanted to establish a Republic of Taiwan. And so there were many factions, but nowadays those factions have been narrowed to basically two elements that are different from the KMT. One is that there is still an underlying desire to establish an independent state, and the nuclear power, which I mentioned earlier, in addition to some of the social issues, being more progressive. In terms of Taiwan independence, DPP recently has moderated its stance. Its now official position is that Taiwan is already independent, and her name is the Republic of China. Now, not everybody in the DPP is happy with that, but that's what its current stance is. In terms of relationship with mainland China, it takes a more confrontational stance. And so it's kind of ironic. KMT was originally very staunchly anti-communist. Now it seems to be more moderate. And then it's the DPP, which was originally more friendly towards the mainland, that has taken on a more confrontational stance. So it's one of the many unique features about the Taiwan-China relationship. Now, in terms of Taiwan's democracy, we can say it's a mature democracy. It after the ROC government retreated to Taiwan, it remained under martial rule, which had been imposed on the mainland because of the Civil War. So the martial law or martial rule continued basically until the 1980s, and the elections up to 1996 were not true democratic elections, because there was no allowance made for opposition parties. Where, as I mentioned earlier, the DPP didn't formally form until 1986. So between 1986 and between 1996, the democracy started to be loosened up, but the presidential election at that point was still by indirect vote of National Assembly. But from 1996 onwards, there has been direct presidential elections by the electorate. So as you can see, that from 1996 onwards, that there has been two rotations of ruling parties, and that's a very healthy indicator in terms of the maturity of the democracy. Megan mentioned that I lived 3 years in Singapore, and Singapore has elections as well. But Singapore's elections are pretty dour events. People in general are satisfied with the government. The government is not very tolerant of dissent. So those are pretty quiet affairs. And I remember colleagues and friends in Singapore telling me, well, geez, in Taiwan, you guys have such passionate elections. So we wish you can have some of that. So that is indeed the case, and that Taiwan's elections are very vibrant and full of passion. However, with those types of elections, personal smears are very common, and then the ethnic card is still occasionally invoked. Now, when I say ethnic card, this is very different from what we usually associate with China. In China, we think of the Muslim minorities, the Uyghurs, the Hui people, and so on and so forth. In Taiwan, it's really within the Han descendants. These are the Chinese Han descendants. And they're separated primarily by how long you have been in Taiwan. So there are descendants who have been in Taiwan multiple generations versus the more recent arrivals, say around 1949 or in the 1940s and later. Now that distinction is starting to be lost, because even the mainlanders' descendants are now third or fourth generation. So that's starting to be papered over, but still that can still be invoked at times. So the way it rears its ugly head is that sometimes a candidate is questioned as to whether he or she truly loves Taiwan. And that again refers to the candidates' feelings about China, whether there are lingering feelings about China, or are they truly, do they truly believe in Taiwan as the place where one's devotion should be devoted to? I mentioned that the municipal elections in Taiwan serves kind of like a midterm election in the US. And in the 2018 municipal election, particularly in the southern city of Kaohsiung, that there was a very interesting matchup between the KMT and the DPP. Now, the DPP had been in power for 20 plus years. I should mention that also, that both the KMT and the DPP are capable of corruption. KMT was probably more corrupt at one point, but with the DPP having been in power, both at the central government level and at the municipal level, the DPP has proven itself to be capable of corruption as well. So DPP has been in power in Kaohsiung for 20 plus years. And that Kaohsiung is also considered to be a sacred ground for the DPP in that many of the early stages of democracy protests were held in Kaohsiung, and many of the early leaders of the DPP were arrested and jailed. And so they have a special affinity for Kaohsiung. Now, usually the KMT candidates for Kaohsiung mayor's election can be considered to be cannon fodder, because they just don't stand a very good chance of being elected. Some of the more recent elections would have 70 to 30 vote split between the DPP and the KMT. And this time around, initially, it was considered that the KMT's prospect was bleak. First of all, the KMT candidate, Han Kuo-yu, he was not local. He lacked resources. And on top of that, he was a second generation mainlander. So you can say he had kind of multiple strikes against him. His opponent, Chen Chi-mai, in contrast, was a native son. He was a legislator in the ROC government's legislature. He was a doctor by training, and so by all normal measures, he should have been a shoo-in. However, there was a big contrast in personal styles. The KMT candidate took on a populist type of campaign versus the establishment Chen. Chen tended to appear always in suit and tie, whereas Han, as you can see, usually appeared in his characteristic blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Significantly in this election, and which was a very positive development in Taiwan's election culture, was that both candidates agreed that there should be no personal attacks, and that worked really to Han's favor, because Han had been out of the political limelight for many years, and his past was not really examined in detail by his opposition, because both candidates promised no personal attacks. Now, Han's personal style and populist approach really saw unexpected and enthusiastic response, and it became a real phenomenon in that the media coverage was almost 24/7. All of Taiwan switched their focus to Kaohsiung because of the sudden change in landscape. Here at here at the bottom, you can see one of the pictures from one of Han's rallies. Is that these rallies were always packed with people. He didn't always have the best grounds for holding his rallies because the local folks were initially reluctant to rent the space to somebody who was unlikely to win. But despite having poor grounds for holding rallies, he always had enthusiastic following, and they were always well attended. And so his populist approach really took off, and he started to promote himself as the champion of the common people, which struck a chord with the population. His focus was on the farmers and the fishermen of Kaohsiung, and he promised that he would if elected, he would help them to find export markets for Kaohsiung's products. His slogan was very simple, and it loses somewhat in the translation, but it roughly translates to Kaohsiung will prosper if we can sell our products and welcome people. Then welcome people was the second leg of his platform, which was that to develop the tourist industry for Kaohsiung. Now that's in contrast to Chen's initial slogan, which was Industry 4.0. Now Industry 4.0 has a lot of substance behind it. For those of you who are familiar with engineering and industry, it pertains to the Internet of Things, the modern connected enterprises, and so on and so forth. Now, Kaohsiung's industry is tended to be the more traditional industries in terms of steelmaking, shipbuilding, and petroleum refining. So obviously, Kaohsiung needed a transformation of its industrial base, and it'd be safe to say that Chen Qimai had a lot more substance, but he lost out to the more populist rhetoric of being able to sell our products and welcome people. The other appeal that Han had was that the DPP had been in power for 20 plus years, and he asked the people, really, do they really deserve the unquestioned support, despite it being sacred ground and other factors? So he was, as you can see, he was successful in his campaign. That he obtained close to 54% of the votes, whereas the opponent only obtained around 45%. So that is a huge swing compared to the 70-30 type of split that used to be seen in DPP's favor. As I mentioned, the Kaohsiung elections almost received 24/7 coverage in Taiwan's media. And that had also spillover effect to the other municipal elections. And as you can see, from 2014 to 2018, many municipalities swung from DPP control to KMT control. And if I should mention that this municipal election took place in October of 2018, and that the presidential election would take place in January of 2020. So there is only really 14 months between the municipal elections and the presidential election. So based on the results of the 2018 municipal elections, it certainly seemed that the KMT was well positioned for the 2020 elections. But as we'll see, that I'm kind of giving away the plot here. That did not turn out the way it appeared in 2018. And this was also so once the municipal elections were over, both parties turned their attention to the primaries for the presidential election. So on the KMT side, we had a crowded field of interested candidates. This included Foxconn Corporation's CEO, Terry Goh, a noted industrialist. We had the traditional heavyweights from within the party itself. So there was quite a few of interested candidates, including the then incumbent chairman of the KMT. However, because of Han's popularity, there was a draft Han movement. And many of them were somewhat fanatical supporters and with the Bernie bro-like tactics. And that was disruptive and that was very unusual within KMT, because KMT in the past used to always negotiate within as to who would be the candidate, and having an open primary was even a relatively new thing for the party. Because of this draft Han movement, and of course because of Han's personal ambitions, he entered and won the primary election. When he entered the primary election, he had been on the mayor's job for 4 months. So that started, you can say that started some resentment against him. On the other side, we have the DPP. The incumbent president is Tsai Ing-wen. He had to resign the DPP chairship due to losses in the municipal election. And he also faced a primary challenge from her own former premier, partially due to the fact that she was considered too moderate by some of the people in her own party with respect to the Taiwan independence platform. And the former premier was considered more aligned to this faction's desires. But Tsai, she survived the challenge and was the candidate for the DPP. As you recall, that during the Kaohsiung election, that it was a gentleman's contest. There were no personal attacks. But once this general election campaign started, the gloves came off this time. That Han's past, including his possible activity in real estate speculation and extramarital affairs, all these were brought up. I think some of those allegations were true, but his image as common people's champion was damaged in the process. But that wasn't really the biggest factor. As the general election started to get going in all seriousness, Hong Kong's anti-extradition movement started to heat up as well. And that had a major impact. Ability to defend Taiwan's sovereignty then became the central issue. And even though both parties vowed they would never accept Beijing's solution, which is one country, two systems that Hong Kong lives under, DPP's message or Taiwan's message that today's Hong Kong or could be tomorrow's Taiwan hit a chord with the young voters. In contrast, KMT's narrative for cross-trade relationships was still the 1992 consensus that seemed dated. The DPP's was also successful in kind of positioning the 1992 consensus as being equivalent to one country, two systems, which is strictly speaking not true, but nevertheless, as you can see in a heated election with passions running high, that was the, that narrative took hold. So as you can see that the election result was that Taiwan was able to move on to her second term. He won a resounding victory over Han. There was a third party candidate. This is about his fourth or fifth time running. It's a splinter party from the Pan Blue camp. And so he was really not a significant factor. Now we also have to look at the fact, if you look at the results, this really was a pretty terrible defeat for the KMT. But before Hong Kong's anti-extradition movement took hold, at the early stages of the presidential campaign, Han actually had a sizable lead over Tsai. And so in the neighborhood of 10-20%. And so there was a major switch during the campaign, and that took place within 13-14 months. So this was again a very dramatic development. So this election, as I mentioned, it showed a dramatic switch, and the KMT's inability to engage with the young voters really showed its face, and remain a major challenge going forward. I often think of try to draw parallels of the Quebec Separation election I experienced when I lived in Quebec at my first job after university. There was a lot of passion on the Quebecois part, but they failed in their bid. And they were supported mostly by young people. But they failed in their bid to separate from Canada, because pragmatic considerations, economic considerations overrode the passion of separation. And so there's a bit of that happening in Taiwan as well. Now, Postscript, post the presidential election, Han Kuo-yu, he's facing a recall election campaign for neglecting his mayoral duties. Of course, this is politically motivated, because he had delegated to his deputies. But this recall election is heating up, and his political future is very uncertain. The KMT's chairman, he also had to step down because of the poor showing in the general election. And there's been a generational change in KMT's leadership. The new chair is a 48-year-old legislator, Zhang Jichen. He was elected chairman. He's educated, He's got a Ph.D. from University of California, University of Southern Carolina, I mean. He promised to thoroughly reform the KMT, including possible revision to the cross-strait narrative, namely the 1992 consensus. Significantly, he did not receive a congratulatory message from China's Xi Jinping. Now, the relationship between the KMT and China's Communist Party had normalized to the extent that the leaders customarily, since the late 90s, have sent congratulatory messages to each other when the chairman is a new chairman is elected. So this is probably because due to the fact that Jiang Qichen he did not emphasize the 1992 consensus during his election during his bid to be the chairman, and he included possible revision to the cross-strait narrative. So some observations and implications. First of all, I mean, it's pretty obvious that in terms of Han Kuo-yu, that the momentary success can go to one's head. He really could have been a very successful mayor, and he could have really done something for Kaohsiung, but instead he's facing a recall election. On a larger scale, as I mentioned earlier, a kind of a nuanced approach in these complex geopolitical situations, such as the 1992 consensus, can easily lose out in heated political discourse. And but it has served two sides quite well, and that one may not realize its value until the consensus is no longer there. So this is something that that obviously we should keep an eye out. In terms of implications, any regional tension will have ramifications on the sort of commercial industrial side. In spite of its size, Taiwan plays a very important role in many industries. For example, computer chips, especially the manufacturing side of it. It's a world leader in computer chip manufacturing. So regional tensions, any rise in regional tensions can certainly severely affect the global supply chain, as we're seeing now with the COVID-19 situation. And on a more political scale, for especially for those of you who remember there have been 3 Taiwan Strait crises up to this point in 1995, 1955, 1958, and 1996. There have been armed conflicts, or in 1996 it was missile tests. So it wasn't a conflict per se, but in 1995 and 1958 were armed conflicts in the Taiwan Strait. In today's environment, it's really in no one's interest for Taiwan to be the flashpoint for armed conflict. But given Taiwan's geopolitical positioning and its importance to both the U.S. and China, it remains a chess piece between the U.S. and China. And so that is something that we have to be cognizant of. And this is something that Taiwan itself has to be very careful in how to balance the U.S. and China relationships. Taiwan has important trading relationships with both the US and China. And politically, it also has ties, very close ties with both sides as well. So it's not a simple binary choice of picking sides. That who do you it's not like in some other countries where you can choose a side and be not affected as much as Taiwan can be. I think my time is coming up, so I just like to end with some concluding thoughts. The polling in China, polling in Taiwan has repeatedly shown that the majority of the population in Taiwan wants to maintain status quo. So given that as the backdrop, for the DPP mainstream also has stability and prosperity as priorities. So political rhetoric aside, how far can the DPP go in pushing the envelope for Taiwan independence? Conversely, how far can the DPP tack towards the middle without alienating the pro-independence faction? So that's the challenge the DPP faces. On the other side, with the KMT, the ability to maintain a stable cross relationship has been KMT's strength, but has it become a liability? So that's a question that it has to answer. And then the current cross-strait narrative, the 1992 consensus, may prove to be a hurdle in terms of winning more presidential elections. But getting the more conservative faction or the pro-unification faction within the party itself to agree to a new narrative may be a challenge. So it's like a lot of things in Taiwan. It's just like everywhere else. It's complicated. So the question then becomes, is there an opportunity for a third party without the baggage of either the DPP or KMT? In this past election cycle, there have been a lot of discussion about that. And there were what seemingly like alliances that were being formed, but that did not end in any nominated candidate, a viable third-party candidate. So, but it's something that we should keep an eye on as we go into the future. So, thank you very much for your attention. That concludes my presentation, and I'll be happy to take any questions. I should mention also that of the I've shown that a lot of the presidential candidates from both sides have a close relationship to the U.S. Actually, one of the presidents, one of Taiwan's past presidents, actually has an Iowa connection, and that was President Lee Teng-hui, who was the president between 1992 and 2000. He obtained his master's of agronomy degree from the Iowa State University. So even though seemingly we're quite far apart, but there are Iowa connections in terms of Taiwan's election politics and the state of Iowa. Again, thank you for your attention.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much, Dave, for doing this presentation in this way. I think it worked beautifully. I hope everyone can agree. We can move on to a question and answer period. So we ask that you submit your questions via the chat function, so you can access that at the bottom of the Zoom screen. There's a chat box icon and the word chat. You can send that to Dave privately or to everyone in the group, and Dave, you should be able to see those and can answer them at will. While we give a bit of time for questions to continue coming in, I just wanted to mention that we do have several programs like this one in the works, so stay tuned. As of right now, we don't have details, but we will send out our usual email announcements, and please check our website for the latest updates on these programs. With that, I can turn it over back to you, Dave, for questions.
Okay, so I got the first question from Bill, and Bill's question is, to what extent is Han's populism similar to populist politicians' parties in the US and Europe? Nativism, fear of the deep state, etc. Yeah, this is a very interesting question. Now, Han's popularity or his populist approach, there are definitely similarities. He was kind of within the KMT. He was not a elite in the sense he was not educated in the States. He didn't have a PhD degree, which many of the KMT's elites do. It doesn't mean he was poorly educated. He did graduate from college, and he has a master's degree as well, but they're all from universities in Taiwan itself. But he pitted himself as the champion for the common people, and he had criticized the leadership or the culture within the KMT as being elitist, and so he advocated also for reform within the KMT. Now, he did not. There was another factor, commonality, common thread between his brand of populism, which was that he tended to denigrate the females, and so he was kind of a macho type of guy, which perhaps served him well, but polling also in his Kaohsiung elections, but the polling also showed that the support amongst the women was always lower for him compared to his support among men. But in other respects, he was different. He was not. He was certainly. He certainly didn't. There's immigration to Taiwan from other Asia Pacific countries. Immigration's not a big factor, but he certainly didn't show any anti-immigrant tendencies. So there are similarities, but there are also differences. Okay. And just a question from Peter, do Formosa and Taiwan have different meanings? Yes, they do. Formosa is actually a Portuguese, his origins in Portuguese, and it means a beautiful island. And Taiwan is a Chinese term, and I really don't think Taiwan necessarily has any meaning per se. Certainly, Formosa is a name that used to be more popular, and Taiwan in more recent times have become the kind of the name du jour today. Question from Art Spisak. How much of a problem is corruption in Taiwan today? Is it similar to China? I don't think the the corruption in Taiwan is as serious as it was in China, say, a few years ago. As Megan mentioned, I travel quite a bit in the Asia Pacific region, and there were a few years where I spent a lot of time in China, and the lavishness of some of the banquets is just an indicator of potential corruption, if we can use that as an indicator. Some of the banquets in China were just out of this world. I mean, how can a country that used to be so poor be all of a sudden become so lavish? And that's a question I always had in the back of my mind. In Taiwan, say if I were to go to business dinners, they were much more modest. Now, corruption in the sense in the government, in terms of nepotism, in terms of say channeling projects to your political allies, that is very, very, I should say, that's common in Taiwan. Now, be it KMT in power or the DPP in power, that happens, and that happens in many democracies. Now, on the government level, in China, of course, there's a difference between the state-owned enterprises and private enterprises. And so, again, there's a difference there. If there is a state-owned enterprise, that they would be favorably treated in China versus the privately owned enterprise. In Taiwan, that is not an issue. So I hope that answered that question. Yes, Bill just shared this information that Transparency International ranks mainland China 80th in the world, and Taiwan ranks 28th, and the lower ranking means less corruption. So, so that's good information, Bill. Any other questions?
Okay, I guess if we don't have any questions, we can conclude the program. I want to give a big thank you once again to you, Dave, for doing this and piloting our new online approach to programs. I think it went really well. And as always, I want to thank our sponsors, members, and interns for helping to make the programs possible. And I thank City Channel 4 for helping us live stream this to Facebook, and we will be recording and have this available for viewing in the future through all of the usual means. Dave, this is the part where normally we would give you the coveted ICFRC mug. Unfortunately, that's a bit difficult to do virtually, so we'll have to get that to you at a future date. But thank you everyone again for joining us, and with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you, Megan.